Hello everyone, and welcome to my BNB Spoilers 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The tension inside the Forrester mansion felt suffocating, the kind of heavy silence that settles before a storm, and no one, not Ridge, not Brooke, not Steffi, not even Eric himself, was prepared for the words that were about to detonate like a bomb in the center of their world, because when Ivy Forrester finally stepped forward, her hands trembling but her chin lifted with a defiance no one had seen in years, she didn't just clear her throat or ask for patience. She shattered decades of carefully constructed lies with 6 explosive words. "She is my daughter, not my niece." And in that instant, time seemed to freeze across Los Angeles and within the halls of Forrester Creations, because the truth Ivy had buried for so long had finally clawed its way into the light, leaving every member of the Forrester family stunned into silence as Electra stood just a few feet away, her entire identity unraveling before her eyes. And if there had ever been a secret capable of shaking the legacy of the Forresters to its very foundation, this was it, a revelation so personal, so devastating, that it would alter relationships forever and force everyone to confront not only Ivy's past, but their own blind trust in the stories they had always accepted without question. For years, Ivy had returned to Los Angeles from Australia under the quiet assumption that she was the loving aunt, the devoted family member who cared deeply for young Electra, yet kept a subtle emotional distance that no one quite understood. But now, as she stood in the grand living room of the Forrester estate with every eye locked on her, the truth poured out in a rush she could no longer contain, her voice cracking as she explained that decades ago, when she was barely more than a girl herself, she had fallen in love with a man who was never meant to be part of the Forrester world, a man whose identity she refused to reveal at first, someone powerful and connected, someone whose involvement would create another scandal entirely if his name were spoken aloud, and terrified of disgrace, terrified of losing her place in the family, terrified of bringing shame upon Eric and the Forrester name, she had made the impossible choice to let the world believe that her child was her sister's, her niece, her responsibility, but not her flesh and blood. And as those memories flooded back, tears streamed down her face. Yet there was also a strange sense of relief in finally speaking the truth she had suffocated beneath for so long. Electra's reaction was the most heartbreaking of all, because while the rest of the family reeled in shock, Steffi whispering, "This can't be real," Ridge demanding answers in that commanding tone that had once terrified interns at Forrester Creations, Electra simply stared at Ivy as if seeing her for the first time, her entire childhood flashing before her, every moment when Ivy had hovered protectively, every instance when she had seemed too invested, too emotional, too desperate to keep Electra safe from heartbreak and from men and from Los Angeles itself. And suddenly those memories transformed into clues she had missed, puzzle pieces sliding into place in a way that left her breathless, because the woman she had called Aunt Ivy was now claiming to be her mother, the one person who had shaped her life from the shadows while pretending to stand just outside the circle of parenthood. The explosion of emotion that followed was inevitable, and it was Eric Forrester who finally broke the stunned silence, his voice filled with disbelief and wounded pride as he asked Ivy how she could have kept such a monumental truth from him, from all of them, for so many years, how she could allow the family to believe in a lie that touched the very core of their lineage. And Ivy, shaking but resolute, confessed that she had believed she was protecting them, protecting the Forrester brand from scandal, protecting Electra from whispers and judgment, protecting herself from the shame she felt as a young, unmarried woman pregnant with a child she wasn't ready to raise under the scrutiny of the fashion world's most powerful dynasty. And though she had convinced herself that the lie was an act of love, she now realized it had grown into a prison of silence that trapped them all. What made the confession even more devastating were the immediate implications it carried, because if Electra was Ivy's daughter, then the identity of her father became the question that hung in the air like smoke after a fire, and Ridge, ever the protector of the Forrester name, demanded to know who the man was, his jaw clenched as if bracing for another betrayal, while Brooke placed a gentle hand on Electra's shoulder. sensing that the young woman's world was disintegrating faster than anyone could repair it, and Ivy's hesitation only deepened the tension, because she knew that speaking the father's name would ignite another inferno, one that could drag even more members of the family into chaos. Rumors had swirled in the past, quiet whispers that Ivy had once been involved with someone inappropriate, someone forbidden, perhaps even someone within the Forrester orbit, but no one had dared to press her, and now those old speculations resurfaced with renewed intensity. Steffi's eyes narrowing as she wondered whether this revelation might somehow intersect with past rivalries and betrayals that had already scarred the family, and the more Ivy struggled to explain, the clearer it became that this was not simply a youthful mistake, but a calculated deception maintained for decades, a choice repeated every time she introduced Electra as her niece, every time she corrected someone who casually referred to her as Electra's mother, every time she swallowed the truth to preserve a fragile illusion. Electra's voice finally pierced the chaos, trembling yet fierce as she asked Ivy one simple question. "Why didn't you trust me with the truth?" And that question cut deeper than any accusation from Ridge or Eric, because it struck at the heart of their relationship, at the trust that had defined their bond, and Ivy's answer was raw and unfiltered. She had been afraid that Electra would hate her. Afraid that the revelation would destroy the only connection she had ever known, afraid that claiming her publicly would expose secrets that could still harm them both, and in trying to protect her daughter from pain, she had unknowingly set the stage for a far greater heartbreak. As the hours unfolded and the initial shock gave way to anger, sorrow, and reluctant empathy, the Forrester family found themselves divided, some believing Ivy's intentions had been noble despite the deception, others insisting that no justification could excuse such a monumental lie, and yet beneath the arguments lay a deeper fear. If this truth could remain hidden for so long, what other secrets might still linger in the shadows of their legacy, waiting to emerge and shatter the carefully curated image of unity and strength they presented to the world? Meanwhile, Electra retreated to the guest house, desperate for space to process the avalanche of emotion crashing over her, and Ivy followed at a distance, unsure whether to pursue her daughter or respect her need for solitude, because the dynamic between them had shifted irrevocably, no longer aunt and niece but mother and daughter, a transformation that required not just words but a complete rebuilding of trust. And as night fell over Los Angeles, the once imposing Forrester mansion felt smaller, almost fragile, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the shock of Ivy's confession. In the days that followed, the scandal rippled outward, reaching the halls of Forrester Creations where whispers spread faster than any official statement could contain them, employees speculating about the implications for the family's image and whether Electra's status within the company would change now that her true parentage was revealed, and Ridge, ever mindful of public perception, began strategizing damage control, though part of him couldn't shake the sting of personal betrayal. Because Ivy had grown up under the Forrester banner, and her deception felt like a crack in the very foundation of the dynasty he had fought so hard to protect. Yet amid the turmoil, something unexpected began to emerge, a quiet resilience within Electra, who, after days of silence, finally confronted Ivy again, this time not with accusations but with cautious vulnerability, admitting that while the truth had shattered her sense of identity, it also answered questions she had carried for years, questions about why Ivy's love had always felt deeper, fiercer, more desperate than that of a typical aunt. And in that fragile conversation, the first tentative steps toward reconciliation began, though the road ahead remained uncertain and fraught with lingering hurt. Ultimately, Ivy's shocking confession did more than stun the Forrester family. It forced them to confront the complexities of love, shame, and redemption, to acknowledge that even within a dynasty built on glamour and power, human frailty could not be erased, and as the dust slowly settled, one truth became undeniable. The revelation that "she is my daughter, not my niece," would echo through their lives for years to come, reshaping alliances, redefining identities, and reminding them all that the most dangerous secrets are not those whispered by enemies, but those buried within the heart of family itself. waiting for the moment when silence can no longer contain them. The aftermath of Ivy's confession did not fade quietly into the background of Forrester life. Instead, it deepened, twisted, and evolved into something far more complicated than a single shocking moment, because once the truth was spoken aloud, once "she is my daughter, not my niece," echoed through the marble halls of the mansion, it could not be contained, and the emotional fallout began seeping into every corner of the family's existence, reshaping not only how they saw Ivy and Electra, but how they saw themselves. The illusion of stability that had long defined the Forrester dynasty now felt fragile, as though one more revelation could bring the entire structure crashing down. Electra struggled most visibly in the days that followed. She avoided the main house, refused family dinners, and ignored calls from extended relatives who had already heard whispers of the scandal. Social media speculation didn't help. Fashion insiders and gossip blogs were buzzing, dissecting timelines, questioning who Electra's father might be, and speculating whether Ivy's silence had been driven by love or ambition. For someone who had grown up believing she understood her place in the world, the sudden loss of certainty felt like standing on shifting sand. Her childhood memories felt distorted. Every birthday, every comforting embrace, every stern lecture from Aunt Ivy now carried a new weight. It wasn't just that Ivy had lied, it was that she had rewritten Electra's identity without her consent. Ivy, meanwhile, found herself isolated in a different way. Though some family members expressed sympathy, none fully trusted her anymore. Conversations halted when she entered a room. Ridge's once cordial demeanor had hardened into cool politeness. Steffi, ever protective of the Forrester legacy, made it clear that deception of this magnitude couldn't simply be forgiven because it was wrapped in maternal love. Eric, perhaps the most conflicted of all, vacillated between compassion and disappointment. He understood youthful mistakes. He understood fear. But he could not ignore the fact that Ivy had allowed him and the entire family to believe a false narrative for decades. The question of Electra's father loomed larger with each passing day. Ridge confronted Ivy again, this time privately, insisting that the truth could no longer be withheld. If she wanted to rebuild trust, she had to lay everything bare. Ivy resisted at first, not out of defiance, but out of dread. Revealing the father's identity would not just reopen old wounds, it would create new ones. The man in question was not a stranger to the family. He had once moved within their social circle, admired and respected. The implications were explosive. When Ivy finally spoke the name, the reaction was volcanic. The father had been someone connected to the Forrester empire, someone whose reputation was intertwined with their own. The revelation didn't just add another layer to the scandal, it threatened to drag an entirely different chapter of family history into the spotlight. Old rivalries resurfaced. Past betrayals were re-examined under this new lens. Suddenly, events from years ago, disputes, abrupt departures, unexplained tensions, took on new meaning. Electra learned the truth about her father not from a carefully planned conversation, but from overhearing fragments of a heated argument. The pain of discovering her mother's identity had been devastating enough. Learning that her father had been close to the family and had never acknowledged her existence cut even deeper. She felt erased, as though her life had been treated like a liability to be managed rather than a child to be cherished. Her confrontation with Ivy that night was raw and unfiltered. She demanded to know whether her father had ever known about her. Ivy admitted that he had. He had known. And he had agreed that the lie was necessary to protect reputations, careers, and futures. That admission nearly destroyed whatever fragile bridge had begun forming between mother and daughter. Electra wasn't just grappling with deception. She was grappling with the realization that both of her parents had chosen silence over acknowledgement. Yet amid the heartbreak, a new strength began to emerge within Electra. Rather than retreating into victimhood, she began asserting control over her own narrative. She decided that if her identity had been hidden for years, she would now define it publicly and unapologetically. She returned to Forrester Creations not as the quiet niece grateful for her place, but as Ivy's daughter, aware of the controversy yet unwilling to be shamed by it. Her presence sent a clear message: she would not disappear. The family's internal dynamics shifted accordingly. Brooke, often the voice of emotional reasoning, encouraged reconciliation. She reminded Ridge and Steffi that their own histories were riddled with secrets and second chances. The Forrester legacy had survived affairs, betrayals, and shocking revelations before. What mattered now was how they chose to move forward. Eric eventually invited Ivy to speak privately in his study. The conversation was long, reflective, and filled with difficult truths. He acknowledged her fear as a young woman, the pressure of living under the Forrester name, the terror of scandal in an unforgiving industry. But he also made it clear that trust, once broken, required more than tears to repair. Ivy would have to earn her place again, not as a distant relative shielding herself with half-truths, but as a mother willing to stand openly beside her daughter. Publicly, the scandal became unavoidable. A carefully worded statement was released, acknowledging that Ivy had recently shared personal family information and asking for privacy. The fashion press devoured it. Talk shows speculated. But something unexpected happened. Rather than condemning Ivy outright, many viewers responded with empathy. Stories of hidden pregnancies, family secrets, and reclaimed identities resonated deeply. The narrative shifted from scandal to redemption. Electra, watching the coverage, felt a subtle shift inside herself. The shame she had initially carried began to loosen its grip. She realized that her existence was not a mistake. It was a testament to complicated love and flawed decisions, but it was not something to hide. The most powerful turning point came weeks later during a quiet evening at the mansion. Ivy approached Electra without rehearsed speeches or defensive explanations. She simply admitted that fear had ruled her life for too long. Fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of losing her daughter. And in trying to outrun that fear, she had nearly lost her anyway. This time, Electra didn't respond with anger. She responded with honesty. She said she needed time, not distance, not silence, but time, to rebuild what had been fractured. Slowly, intentionally, they began creating new memories untethered from lies. Mother-daughter lunches replaced strained formal dinners. Conversations about the past became less accusatory and more reflective. Ivy shared stories from Electra's infancy, stories she had once hidden behind the title of aunt. Hearing them reframed as a mother's recollections rather than a guardian's softened something in Electra's heart. The father's role, however, remained unresolved. Whether he would step forward publicly or remain in the shadows was uncertain. His silence continued to sting, but Electra decided she would not allow his absence to define her. If he chose anonymity, that was his burden to carry. For the Forrester family as a whole, the scandal ultimately became a catalyst for uncomfortable but necessary introspection. They had long prided themselves on image, legacy, and control. Ivy's confession shattered that illusion of control, reminding them that no amount of prestige could erase human vulnerability. Secrets, no matter how carefully guarded, have a way of surfacing. In the end, Ivy's declaration, "She is my daughter, not my niece," proved to be both a destruction and a rebirth. It dismantled years of carefully constructed deception, but it also created space for authenticity. The path forward was far from simple. Trust would take time. Wounds would leave scars. But the truth, once spoken, allowed healing to begin. And perhaps that was the most shocking outcome of all. Not the scandal, not the anger, not even the fractured relationships, but the realization that honesty, however delayed, had the power to reshape destiny. Within the grandeur of the Forrester mansion, beneath chandeliers that had witnessed decades of triumph and betrayal, a new chapter quietly unfolded, one not built on illusion, but on the fragile, courageous act of telling the truth.